Hello and welcome to the show. Today is June 18th, 2023. It is Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Today we'll be talking about what used to be a stock symbol MMTLP, what is now the private company next Bridge Hydrocarbons, and we'll be talking about oil today. So let me start by saying I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is of course intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. So hello out there. Now, today we'll be talking about oil. So what happened is that, and the reason we'll be talking about oil is I entered the end of a live space. I think Junk Savvy was probably running it, and Pecos Bill was there. He's an oil guy, and we started talking a little bit about oil, and he asked me how I came up with my estimation. So I referred him to a video. Actually, I tweeted about a video, and I referred him to my tweet and said, "Hey, look, I did this estimation a while back." And some other people asked me about, oil and whether or not, we needed to update the calculation based upon the fact that we now have more shares. I mentioned, well, not really. I think we now have 100% working interest, but it all works out. And so we don't need to really update the valuation because the valuation is on a per share basis, right? But in either case, it wasn't intuitively obvious to most people, I think. So I'm making this video about it. Now, let me start by saying that there's a lot of people who say that there's no oil in the Orogrande Basin. And to them, I have to say, I'm not a geologist. I haven't gone there myself. Haven't drilled into the earth, recovered the oil, had it analyzed. So I'm really not the guy to talk to if you don't think that there's oil there. There's a lot of people, There's a lot of people also who say that, the moon landings are fake and the moon is really made of cheese. But, and to those people, I also have to say, I haven't gone to the moon. I've heard that there are people who took a rocket ship and went there, and that their trip lasted, several days. Apparently they did some calculations. They figured out the moon was about 250,000 miles from Earth, but I didn't do those calculations, and I didn't conduct the experimental research to figure that out. When those people did their calculations of what they thought the moon was made of and all that, they estimated that the gravity on the moon was about 1/6 that of the Earth. They said the moon was this great big giant thing, not made of cheese, but actually made of, made of rock. And a lot of people were skeptical. And, they even had televised landings of people walking on the moon, getting to the moon, But I personally have not been to the moon, so I cannot vouch for that data. But I kind of believe them. They seem to be the experts at it, so I'm going to leave that to them to say that we went to the moon. I have not verified that, that we actually did go to the moon. Could have been faked for all I know, but I don't think so. I'm relying on experts here. And that's the way that the world works, for me at least. I mean, I haven't verified the hole in the ozone layer. There's a big hole in the ozone layer that was over the Antarctica. I haven't verified that. I haven't gone to Antarctica. In fact, I haven't even verified that Antarctica exists because I've never been there. But I'm told it does, and I'm told it's very cold down there. Okay? Just wanted to let those people know. But if you have a problem with thinking that there's no oil in the Orogrande Basin, I'm not really the guy to talk to. Okay? Because I haven't actually done the verification myself. I will state, this is kind of loud. I will state that I have seen some videos like this on the old Torchlight website, and apparently they have things like this completion flare stack where they're burning off, some excess. They're burning off some excess gases. I had no idea there was sound there and that it was loud. Also, there's a video like this where they've actually taken. Wow, that flare stack is still going. Apparently there's a lot of stuff there to burn out. But, could have been fake. I don't know. I wasn't there. But it's good to see, It's good to see. There's also a cool video here about, testing some samples there. And apparently it's 41 degree API. That's a specific gravity of oil. And... all
right, Scott. So I've been able to get a pretty decent sized sample. Okay, I'm wondering if you can really see that greenish tint in there now. Hope you can.
So yeah, there's some samples over there, and this was from the University Founders A25 number 1 well. Okay. There's also some drone footage of when they started actually, drilling for oil. Again, this was from the old Torchlight days. Someone took a drone. I can't really say for sure who it was, but I think it's a pretty cool view. I think it looks pretty cool. I love seeing drone footage. This is like nice high res footage. This was, of course, at night with with it all being all lit up. But this is what a well looks like. This is what happens when you drill in, or I believe this is the case. How's that? Anyway, this is some drone footage from there. All of this information, of course, comes from Torchlight Energy, and most of the information, actually all of the information from my, all of the information from my calculations is based upon this investor presentation in March of 2020. This is the last bit of info that came out. Again, I happen to mention that I am not a geologist. I don't know much about rocks. Don't know much about rocks myself. But there's this guy. His name is Rich Masterson. He's the consulting geologist. And when you ask around about Rich Masterson, oh, there's another one over here, Mike Zebrowski and Daniel Zebrowski. So when you ask about these guys, apparently they have a pretty good reputation. And at least Pecos Bill told me they had a pretty good reputation. Bird Lady Roller Pigeons told me that they had a pretty good reputation. So I don't think they would try to, risk their reputation with some, by claiming that there's oil when there's not oil. I believe the rumor has it that Rich Masterson is, prior to Rich Masterson, coming to the scene in the Orogrande, in the Permian Basin. What happened was that there was this. Let me go back. Prior to Rich Masterson, prior to Rich Masterson coming on the scene at the Orogrande Basin, there was this theory called peak oil, right? It said we were running out of oil. We would have run out of oil by, I think, the year 2000 or something like that. I'm not sure. But Rich Masterson came on the line, and actually, I think we were supposed to run out of oil by 2020 or something like that. I mean, 1980 or something like that. I forget. But it was a theory of peak oil, right? Our diminishing reserves, that whole thing. But Rich Masterson, he took a hard look at the Permian Basin using new technologies at that time, which included hydraulic fracking. And sure enough, he found that he could recover a lot more oil. And in fact, currently the U.S. is the number one oil producer in the world, and that could be largely thanks to Rich Masterson and his rediscovery of the Permian Basin. So he's got a pretty good reputation right then and there, just for the hell of it. But again, it's best to do your own research. Check out Rich Masterson and these guys, Zebrowski. They seem to know what they're doing. They know a hell of a lot more about oil than me. So anyway, they believe that there's oil. This is the estimate that they came up with, anywhere from 2.3 billion barrels of oil to 5 billion barrels of oil. And for all of my calculations, I've been using the middle number, the median BTE case of 3.7 billion barrels of oil, or actually 3.2 billion barrels of oil, because that's oil equivalent that they're looking at. Because whenever you see BOEPD, that's oil equivalent. And that includes the natural gas, right? So I've been using 3.2 billion barrels of oil, not even counting the natural gas for the various calculations that I do. Which leads to the question, how much could this be worth? And that's where I come in with calculations. But I got to tell you, it ain't me. Roller Pigeons came up with the calculation first. I got a web link to her video. She was looking at a special dividend. She was looking at a special dividend for Torchlight and MMTLP and the valuation of that. And that's where I first came across that. But her calculation and her methodology is based upon a couple of things. Based on one is this land valuation based upon how much oil there is in the land. This is this is an article from Tierra Grande magazine, but there's a reprint on Texas A&M University, so you can check out that link. Anyway, it has the various land market regions, and there's a strong correlation between how much oil is under the earth and the price of oil and the price of rural land. So that's a big deal. Anyway, so here's a link to the to the methodology which links the price of oil to land prices. Also, I've gotten one other piece of info, which is the COGS cost of goods sold of oil. That's based upon a Wall Street Journal article from 2016. And I've increased that number that they originally had to up to about $30 per barrel because of inflation, and I've now increased that number all the way up to $35 because we've had renewed inflation under our current president, Joe Biden. We now have higher levels of inflation than previously. So all these slides are from a video I did in 2021 or so, and I'll have a link to that as well. Anyway, so this is the Wall Street Journal. They have a barrel breakdown for the cost of oil, and if you look, there's a line item for U.S. shale and U.S. non-shale oil, and this is from a April 15th, 2016 article that was published, and basically they're saying that the cost of producing a barrel of oil is anywhere from $6.42 to the production cost back then. The total production cost is between $21 to $24. Say it's not that much back in 2016 days, right? But so I was just going to say the COGS cost for oil is around the $35 per barrel range now, given inflation with our current president. So I usually take the average price of oil over time and try to use that as my price of oil and try to figure that out. This at the time I took this at the time I made this particular slide, the average cost of oil over the period of 1 year was $90.56. This slide was made. When was this slide made? This was sometime around September of 2022 is when this slide was made. Just before September of 2022 is when this slide was made. But at that time, the average cost of oil was about $90.59 or $90.60. So this is how the calculation is done. There's a quick line item spreadsheet, and I updated the presentation with working interest and royalties. Previously, it was just using revenue interest. But let me go over the calculation line, item by item, okay? This methodology, by the way, was back-tested, or I back-tested this against the ConocoPhillips oil purchase, and there's a video about that I made. Links to the video are there. But Roller Pigeons also back-tested this across ConocoPhillips and several other oil deals at that time. And the correlation was extremely high. So I'm fairly confident about these numbers, just for myself, just because the backtesting seems to have worked in terms of actual oil purchases, right, and oil deals that closed. Anyway, so here's the calculation. Let's go over it. We'll start with the price of oil. I just put a number of $75 per the price of oil in as the first line item. I think it's right now around 71 point something or another. Who knows? But let's start off with let's just take the price of oil at $75. COGS cost is around $35. Subtract 35 from 75, we get $40. That's how much your revenue is based, after expenses. Now, because the oil is in the ground and we're not pumping all the oil out and selling it ourselves, there's a discount, and basically you're only going to get about 12 cents on the dollar because the oil is still in the ground, right? You haven't pumped it all out yet. So at 12 cents on the dollar, that $40 of gross revenue works out to something like $4.80 of potential gross revenue. If you were to sell the oil the oil lands, right? If you were to sell the oil assets, that's you get about 12 cents on the dollar, depending upon the price of oil, right? So royalties, we know, is about 25%, and working interest at the time that I first made this video was about 66.5%. Okay, that implies that you have a revenue interest of about 50%. Okay, how does all of this work? Well, what happens is that Torchlight / Next Bridge Hydrocarbons / Metamaterials, they don't own the land; they're leasing it. But they're leasing it from University Lands, which is the landowner and the mineral owner. And University Lands has a certain royalty that they charge for that, for the lease of the land. So you can lease land from them, you pay a lease fee, but you also have to pay royalties. Once you start pumping oil out of the ground, you have to pay royalties. And there's Magdalena royalties and some unrelated party royalties. Royalties work out to about 25%. When you add up all the royalties, this is over here. Okay. This is from page 15 of the Next Bridge Hydrocarbons 10Q filing, right? Their 10Q filing was on March 31st, 2023. So you can see that there's about 25% of royalties here, right? Further, it actually describes what working interest is, right? So working interest, I'll just read it because they actually have a very good definition here. Working interest means an interest in an oil and gas lease that gives the owner of the interest the right to drill for and produce oil and gas on the leased acreage, and requires the owner to pay a share of the cost of drilling and production operations, right? The share of production to which the working interest owner is entitled will always be smaller than the share of the costs that the working interest owner is required to bear. So, with the balance of the production accruing to the owners of the royalties. So you got royalty owners that they get their money out first, right? And then everything else is split among the working interest parties, right? For example, the owner of 100% working interest in a lease burdened only by a landowner's royalty of 12.5% would be required to pay 100% of the costs of a well, but would be entitled to retain 87.5% of the production. So with working interest, you pay for 100% working interest means that you're going to pay 100% of the costs, and you get everything after royalties. Royalties go out first, okay? So we know that the royalties are 25%. The working interest at the the working interest prior to NextBridge buying 100% of the working interests was around 66.5%. So we take those numbers and we combine that with 3.2 billion barrels of oil in the ground. So we take the $4.80, which is the dollars per barrel of oil in the ground, right? Multiply that by 75%, which is 100% minus 25%. Multiply that by the 66.5%, which is the working interest, right? Multiply that by the 3.2 billion barrels of oil, and you get $7.67 billion. Okay, that's where this number comes from. So this is the amount of dollars that would go, assuming that you've got your 66.5% working interest, right? That's the amount of dollars you'd be generating. Now, to that, there's corporate tax, and I'm saying the corporate tax would be zero if this was a stock swap event, right? Because, there's no income involved then. It's a stock swap, so it's a tax-free event. But if you're going to sell the oil and gas assets, there's also an underwriter's fee. So you might pay 10% for underwriter's fee. That means you get about $6.9 billion after taxes and fees, right? And you split that among 165 million share owners. You get an asset value per share of about $41.67, right? Based upon $75 for the price of oil. There you go. How does that change after you've gotten 100% of the working interest? Well, everything up to this line, which is the dollar value per barrel of oil in the ground, stays the same, exactly the same. You're at $4.80 in terms of dollars per barrel for the oil being in the ground. Okay, now your royalties are still 25%, but your working interest is now 100%. Woohoo! It's awesome, actually. So that means that your 3.2 billion barrels of oil in the ground, that hasn't changed, but you've now got 100% working interest. So to take the $4.80, you multiply that by 75% because you got to pay 25% for royalties, right? Multiply that by the working interest, multiply that by 3.2 billion barrels of oil in the ground, and you get $11.52 billion. That's a lot more money, right? $11.52 billion. There you go. The corporate tax and the underwriter's fee doesn't change. So that $11.52 billion, you have to pay fees on that. After all the fees, you get about $10 billion, 10.4 billion, say, right? But now you also have more shares because to acquire that 100% working interest, you had to pay for it in shares. So now there's more dilution. It's 248.8 million shares out there now. Diluted among all those shares, the asset value per share is exactly the same. It's $41.67. Magic, right? There you go. So as I said, the calculation, although the numbers have changed in terms of how much working interest there is, the dollars per share price has not changed at all. So there you go. That's the exercise to go through. Now, the question comes up. So now that we have this calculation and it's all well and good, this is all based on $75 per barrel of oil, right? We know the price of oil varies and fluctuates over time. So you take this column of $75 per barrel of oil and you replicate it across all different prices, right? Here we're going from $35. Where's my mouse? Here we're going from $35 all the way up to $150. So because I don't like to read a chart of data, because I don't like to read this spreadsheet of data all over the place, I'd rather look at it in chart format. So I just made a chart out of it. Here's my chart. And the chart, of course, does not have all the info that's in the spreadsheet, so I just put all the settings for the spreadsheet, or the relevant settings that I find interesting, over here on the left under settings. It tells the COGS cost, estimated reserves, the discount for oil in the ground, the royalty is 25%, the working interest 100%, corporate tax rate is 0, underwriter's fee is 10%, and the number of shares here is 248.8 million. So we see an idea of what the asset value is in terms of dollars per share. In terms of dollars per share based upon dollars per barrel of oil in the ground. Okay, good to know. This is intrinsic value. I don't think that we will get these dollars per share value because right now we are in a particular situation that involves excess naked shorts, and shorts have shorted this company into the ground, and there's a lot more shares outstanding than the number of shares issued. So factoring into the shorts into account, the price that you might be able to get if this were to sell should be significantly higher than this, I believe, than these prices. This is intrinsic value based, of course, on oil being in the ground. So what happens if the oil is pumped out and sold, right? What would happen then? This chart is about what happens if you were to sell the company or the assets to another oil and gas company like Chevron or ExxonMobil or something like that. Occidental Petroleum, ConocoPhillips, who knows? Say you sell it to those guys, right? This is what you can expect to get per share. But it's different for the guys buying it, right? For them, they're going to pump the oil out of the ground and sell the oil. So how much is this based upon if the oil is pumped out of the ground and sold? Let's see. Why would they want to buy it at these prices? Well, this is why. I take the same. I take the same chart, and all the numbers are the same up to barrels of oil in the ground, and I make some modifications. Right. Let's say that it's going to take 25 years to pump all the oil out of the ground, and let's say that you're able to pump 1/25 of all the oil out of the ground every year, right, for 25 years. That being the case, at $75 per barrel, we're looking at, after royalties and dealing with the 100% working interest, we're now looking at possibly getting $4.4 billion in profit from the sale of that oil and gas. Let me repeat, $4.4 billion in profit from the sale of that oil and gas in the first year. Okay. After you deal with taxes, and if you're going to return 90% of that back as a dividend, let's just say, you're looking at about $3.6 billion being returned to shareholders as a result of this, okay? Let's just say. There were 248 million shares. Let's say this next Bridge Hydrocarbons somehow manages to get the money to develop these oil and gas resources, pump it out of the ground. If you divide $3.6 billion across 248 million shareholders, that's about $14.45 per share, right? And that's a nice dividend that you could potentially get, assuming 90% of it is returned back. That's a lot of that's a very, very nice dividend, right? But how much how much would the shares be worth? Well, the shares don't trade, so there's no value assigned to them. But if you think of it as a dividend yield, let's say that you were calculating a dividend yield of 7.5%, that means that these shares would be worth about $192 per share with a dividend yield of 7.5%. Is that a reasonable dividend yield to pick? Let's see. Let's look at a dividend yield from Chevron. They're looking at, say, 6%. That's in terms of share price and dividend yield. What about ConocoPhillips? They're looking at a forward dividend and yield of 2.4%. This is a lot less than 6%. And ExxonMobil is doing a dividend yield of about 3.64%. So in the oil and gas industry, 7.5% seems like an awfully generous dividend yield. I should cut that number back. What would happen if I cut that number back to like 6%? Let's see. If I cut that number back to 6%, that means that the potential value per share is now $240 from previously $192 at 7.5%. So at 6%, that means that the potential value per share is $240. That's a significant amount of value per share if we were to actually pump the oil and gas out of the ground. So I said, okay, this particular calculation was for $75 per barrel of oil. So again, I redid this particular column of calculations for $50 all the way up to $95, and I said, well, maybe I should go longer than that, right? So again, keeping a spread from $40 all the way up to $130, what would be the potential value of the stock at that point if you were to pump the oil and gas out of the ground? Well, here's a spreadsheet. You can have a look at it. You can read it. Again, I don't like to read spreadsheets and tables. I like to make a chart out of them. So here's the chart that I made. Okay, this is the value of the assets that I see if you were to take the oil and gas to production. Okay, and do this for produce oil and gas for 25 years, and taking oil and gas out of the ground with a 6% dividend yield. That's similar to Conoco. That's similar to Chevron. Okay, so the value could be significantly higher than this if you were to take a smaller dividend payout. A smaller dividend yield, something in the range of, I don't know. I mean, if you're going to go from 6% to 3%, these numbers actually double almost, right? You go from something like, I don't know, let's see, at $100 per barrel oil, you're looking at $338 potential value of share price. And that could go to something in the range of $680 of value, right? If the dividend yield was somewhere in the range of 3%. So that's huge. So there's a lot of value I see to the next Bridge oil and gas, assets, right? There's a ton of value here that could potentially be unlocked. So I'm pretty glad that I got these shares, Now, again, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is, of course, intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. And some people might say, "Hey, you're a pumper and all that." Well, I'm not really. I'm not a pumper because you can't buy this stuff. You can't buy this oil and gas assets. It doesn't trade. You can't buy shares in this. Thanks to FINRA, they U3 halted this somewhere out in December 2022. Right, December 9th, 2022. December 9th and 12th, it was supposed to trade. FINRA U3 halted this 6 months ago and hasn't traded since. But that's what, these are the calculations that I'm thinking based upon data that was released in 2020 timeframe, right? 2020 timeframe. That's when Torchlight actually released this information. Since that time, they found more oil and gas, right? They actually found additional pay zones. They found shallower pay zones. In terms of the oil and gas story, the oil and gas story has only gotten better. So, yeah, oil and gas story has only gotten better. Anyway, this is This is the Tony Twits / Tony at Market Moves, or Market Moves with Tony. Not a financial advisor. It's not financial advice. This information is, of course, intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. And these are my thoughts on oil and gas. Again, I'm not a geologist. I haven't gone there. I haven't, drilled into the ground with my own drill and taken the oil samples. I'm just relying on what, other geologists are saying. And I'm relying on the fact that they don't want to lose their reputation as being a really excellent geologist, right? These are guys that are at the top of their field. You got Masterson, Zebrowskis. I mean, Pecos Bill seemed to like him, and so that's where I'm coming from. That's what I'm thinking. So I hope you find this video interesting. Anyway, it's just me talking about oil, okay? And I'm not an oil expert. I'm just a guy who runs some numbers. Roller Pigeons came up with the original calculation. So a big shout out and thanks to Roller Pigeons. Check out her videos, of course. So big, huge thanks to Roller Pigeons for uncovering the fact that we wouldn't have to deal with dollars per acre, which is impossible to find. But it's much easier to deal with just dollars per barrel for the price of oil and how much oil there is in there. Anyway, that's me signing off. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.